Hey, Dr. John Finn here. Welcome to the Habit Mechanic podcast. Right now, you can get my new best-selling book, Train Your Brain for the AI Revolution, at tougherminds.co.uk. The digital book, audiobook, and physical book are all available at a special price that you won't find anywhere else.
Welcome to the Tougher Minds Masterclass about Wellbeing and Performance Habits, the root cause of success and happiness in life and work. I'm Andrew Whitelam. I'm joined by Tougher Minds founder Dr. John Finn.
Hi, Andrew.
In this masterclass, you'll learn why the human brain is not designed to thrive in the modern world, how to analyze your helpful and unhelpful habits, and how to help yourself and others begin building more helpful habits for success in our challenging world. We're certain this masterclass will be beneficial if you're interested in any of the following: improved performance, increased productivity, greater well-being, enhanced resilience, increased innovation, reduced stress, improved morale, improved employee retention, increases in employee engagement, improved leadership development, better performance under pressure, and successful change management, and also helping others to be healthier and happier. This masterclass is for individuals who want to be their best leaders and future leaders of organizations in business, education, health, sport, and not-for-profit sectors. We'll start with a quote. "The chains of habit are too light to be felt until they're too heavy to be broken." That quote was used by the American billionaire Warren Buffett when he described a point in his life when he was terrified of public speaking. Buffett's regarded as one of the world's most successful investors, and he's one of the wealthiest people on the planet. The so-called Oracle of Omaha provides us with a great example of a highly successful individual who learnt how to improve something that was important in his life. When he started his career in the 1950s, by his own admission, Warren Buffett had great difficulty with public speaking, and he did it very poorly. But he wanted to improve, so he enrolled on a popular training program at the time. This was a Dale Carnegie public speaking course. Warren Buffett explained how the course improved his performance and helped his career. It also boosted his confidence enough so that he could propose to his wife. He's explained that if he hadn't learned to be an accomplished public speaker, his life would have been different and not as successful. Buffett's also said he's always been proud to display his Dale Carnegie certificate for completing the course on his office wall. He says it has pride of place over his prestigious academic degrees. So, John, tell us more.
Warren Buffett's story shows that anyone can achieve their goals and objectives. This is because our brains are designed to change and develop throughout our lives. We never stop learning. And the Warren Buffett story is really an example of somebody stepping back and reflecting on both their helpful and their unhelpful habits. And Warren Buffett recognizing that if I don't get over this problem of not being able to perform under pressure, then I'm not going to be able to achieve the things in life that I want to achieve. And we saw him deliberately addressing this. And by doing that, and if we read other things around Warren Buffett, what we can see is that he's got a very, what we call a purposeful development mindset. And if we're going to be healthier, happier, and at our best more often, this is the kind of mindset that we need to develop. And we're going to talk a lot more about this. Before we do that, it's probably useful to introduce myself. So my name is Dr. John Finn. I've worked in this area of well-being and performance psychology for nearly 20 years now. And I have 3 degrees in this area, including a PhD. And I founded Tougher Minds because I wanted to make it easier for people to be healthier, happier, and at their best more often. And ultimately, to help people to do that, we have to help them to build better habits. We work with some of the biggest companies in the world. We also work with smaller companies that are highly ambitious and they want to grow really quickly. But also we work in education and we work with families, and the things that we teach are truly transferable life skills. So the ideas that we share in this masterclass, you can use in any element of your life, and you can teach to anybody else who you think who might want to be interested in these areas, from your children and everybody else upwards. It's probably worth mentioning that my background and many of my colleagues is sports psychology. And about 15 years ago, I had one of the most important experiences in my professional career and my professional development. I was working on the backroom staff of a professional football team, and we won the league against the odds. We were more favourites to be relegated than win the league. And it was quite an exceptional achievement. And when we looked at the data, it was better than we'd understood, because we'd actually spent 58% less on player wages than our direct competitors, the team that came second and third. We spent about £3.3 million less on player wages. And when we broke that down, it meant that we were acquiring league points for only about £25,000 a point. And it was costing our competitors more than double that. And at the time, this was, and it may still be, I'm not sure, but at the time it was a record in UK professional football for the cheapest league points acquired compared to relative wage spend. And I got so interested in how we'd managed to do this that I pursued a PhD to learn more about how people can be at their best more often, and really how had we created such a powerful team. And you don't have to spend much time working in the area of health, happiness and performance before you get to the limbic regions of the brain. So these are the deep centers of our brain that are running most of what we're doing most of the time. You can actually make a mini model of this if you're interested. So you put your left or your right hand just flat, as if you're saying hi to somebody. And then if you put your thumb into the palm of your hand and you wrap your fingers around your thumb, what you've got in this fist you're almost forming in the hand there is a mini model of the brain. The thumb in the middle represents the limbic regions, the $1 million brain, or what we're going to call the ape brain, which I will explain more about. And then the little finger in your model, that represents the prefrontal cortex, which runs from behind your eyes all the way to the top of your forehead. So if we want to build better habits, we need to understand both these parts of the brain, both the thumb, the limbic regions, and the little finger, the prefrontal cortex. And we're going to begin by thinking about the limbic regions and the fact that they are running most of what we're doing most of the time. This is the ape brain, which we name based on the famous neuroscientist Paul MacLean's work. So Paul MacLean was the first person to make sense of how the brain worked as one unit, and he created something called the True 9 brain model. And he originally labelled this area the monkey brain. So we've gone to the ape brain, and I'll explain more about that later on. But what we need to understand is that most of what we're doing most of the time is mindless behaviour. This has been run by the ape brain. So we can say that at least 98% of what we're doing is habits, because habits are conscious or semi-conscious processes. So unbeknown to most of us, most of what we're doing most of the time is subconscious or mindless behaviour.
So, John, the point you're highlighting here then is that all of us are not really aware and conscious of the vast majority of things that we do every day in our life and work.
Yeah, so I think a really neat way to think about this, and this is from George Lakoff, who's a preeminent professor from Berkeley over in California. And George Lakoff says that for every 50 things your brain is doing, you're only conscious of one, which is pretty remarkable, really. We're not very conscious. We're running on habits. And the reason it's hard to kind of get your head around that is because we are so automatic and so habitual. We'll think about some of those habits shortly. But the good news here is, get some good news in, because it might be sounding a bit negative so far. Just get some good news in early on, is that we can change, because we understand, or we can build new habits because we understand how habits work. We created our trait habit model, which explains how habits work, and we'll talk a bit more about that later on. But first of all, let's just think about some of the habits that we're running on right now. So this is a really important one, breathing. This is a habit. We're not thinking that we need to breathe in and then, I need to breathe out again. It's just ticking away in the background. It's an automated thing. The way that I'm speaking right now is largely automated. I'm not really thinking about it. Hopefully it's clear and the way that you are listening is pretty automated and you're not really thinking about it. You know, I met a new person this morning and never met them before. And I wasn't being mean, but I made a decision about their entire life within about 4 seconds of meeting them. It's not clever, it's not logical, it's just the way that my brain works. And this is how we operate. We operate on mindless behavior. And the way that habits work are, the more you practice them, the better you get at them. And this happens via a process called neuroplasticity. There are about 100 billion neurons in the brain, and they're like plasticine. So the neurons are like plastic, hence neuroplasticity. And those neurons change in accordance with what you do. And our habits are so dominant that they inform our entire experience of the world. So my experience of the world is what I'm in the habit of paying attention to. If I keep paying attention to how useless I am and how I'll never be good and how everyone's really mean to me, then that will be my experience. If I think that I'm never going to be a successful leader, then that will inform my experience of the world because that will become a habit. And this is not just an individual thing. Your teams run on habits. Your family units run on habits. Your business and your organization runs on habits. The culture is ultimately an accumulation of everybody's habits. So this is how we operate.
So what does that mean then, Johnny, in practical terms? I mean, what sort of problems can this cause for individuals?
So if you've got a mental health problem individually, or if you've got mental health problems in the organization, that's about habits. If you've got presenteeism problems, that's about habits. If you've got poor morale, disengaged people and teams, that's about habits. If you've got retention issues, that's about habits. Equally, if you've got superstar performers, that's about habits as well. Habits drive everything that we do, yet they're largely invisible to us.
Okay, so in terms of broad principles then, what kind of things do we all need to pay attention to be our best and succeed?
Yeah, so if we want to be healthy, happy and at our best, there are 3 broad things that we need to get right. The first thing is we need to make sure that our brain is working properly. It's often easy to forget about your brain because you can't see it, but it's there and it's running everything that you're doing. And if our brain doesn't work properly, everything else gets more difficult. And in particular, an area of the brain called the hippocampus or the hippocampi, because there's one in each hemisphere. If this isn't working properly, life gets more challenging. Now, the hippocampus is important because it's the only site in the human brain that we understand produces new brain cells. And if we want to manage stress really well, we need lots of new brain cells. This is because if you don't have lots of new brain cells, it's really easy to get sucked into negative thinking cycles. And if you have lots of new brain cells, it's easier to step back and put perspective on things and think in a flexible way. Also, if you don't have lots of new brain cells, it's difficult to learn, develop, adapt, build new habits. So if we want to make sure that our brain is working properly, we need to get our sleep right, our diet right, and our exercise right. As much as we might think we understand that we need to do that, the data is showing that people are not necessarily very good at that. In the UK last year, the NHS spent about £11 billion on lifestyle-related diseases. These are the diseases that occur because people are not sleeping well, not eating properly, and not exercising properly. So as much as we know that we need to get that right, it appears that we're not doing it particularly well. As well as having a healthy brain function, the next thing that we need to get right, this is kind of some of the good news, is that we call this hedonism. It's important to have hedonistic experiences. Hedonism is all about short-term gratification, doing things that make you feel good in the short term, but are not necessarily good for you in the long term. So that might be eating that piece of tasty food that it's not really good for your weight, but it tastes good in the short term. It might be spending that money that you don't really have, but you can get it on cheap credit. It might be going on that night out that don't really have the time or the money to do, but it makes you feel better in the short term. Buying that piece of clothing that you don't really need, but it makes you feel good. So we need to have fun. We need to have hedonistic experiences. It's important. But the third part, it's kind of the opposite end of the continuum to hedonism, is what we call eudaimonia. So eudaimonia is all about making personal progress. This is about achieving, getting results, moving forwards. And this often requires us to delay short-term gratification. You know, if you are trying to lose some weight and you keep stepping on the scale and the scale isn't moving anywhere, then you give up pretty quickly. And that shines a light on how important progress is for us. And we also know that if we're going to lose weight, that's about delaying short-term gratification, delaying, stopping yourself doing that old habit of eating the stuff that's not necessarily good for you or not exercising enough. So if you get those three things right, get our brain working properly and get a good balance between eudaimonia and hedonism, then it seems like it's much easier for us to be healthy, happier, and perform to our potential. Here's the challenge. We are not designed to be healthy, happy, and at our best as it looks in 21st century life. We are designed, first and foremost, to survive. So we've been evolving for 200,000 years, maybe 300,000 years. This is our species as Homo sapiens. And what's helped us to do that is that we prioritize survival. And our brain's number one operating rule is the easier it is to do something, the more likely it is you will do it. So this is your brain's way of saving energy. And whatever habits you've got right now, they're the easiest thing to do. And the hangover of our evolution is we have lots of instinctive behaviors. And the reason we created the APE acronym is twofold. One is we are great apes, that's our lineage. But two, each letter in APE stands for the things that we are designed to prioritize or appear to be designed to prioritize. The A stands for staying alive. So there aren't many lions, tigers and bears where I live, but this part of the brain still is in operation. So what does it look like? It's that instinctive part of the brain that tells you not to walk through the park when it's dark, not to take the shortcut when it's dark because it might be dangerous. It's better to take the long way around. It's that instinctive part of the brain that tells you to cross the street when a group of people are walking towards you that look a little bit dodgy. And it's much more subtle than that as well. So it seems like it's easier for us to build rapport, relationships, trust with people who look like us, who come from the same kind of place that we come from. We get magnetized towards things that feel familiar. And there's some data from America that shows that there's a disproportionate amount of dentists called Dennis. Because if you think, if your name is Dennis, then being a dentist kind of feels familiar to you, so you might be more inclined to pick that line of work. So that's the A. The P stands for perceived. This is about social status. So humans are not the biggest, strongest or fastest animals on the planet. The reason we've survived and prospered more than any other species is our ability to work intelligently as teams. And language is a core part of this. And if we think about this in terms of survival, if we weren't in a team, our chances of survival went down. So we've evolved brain centers to be interested in survival and social status, to the extent that I was looking at some research the other day that shows that we, as well as having sort of location maps in our brain, we also have social maps in our brain. So, and that's how essential it is. We've got these kind of maps that map out our social relationships with people. So fascinating. And the parts of our brain that are connected to making us aware of social status are hardwired into the parts of our brain that tell us we are thirsty and we are hungry. So that's how essential this is to us. And it seems like our brain can't really distinguish between what we might describe as social and emotional pain and physical pain, because it looks like things like paracetamol and ibuprofen, they have the same impact on social and emotional pain as they do on physical pain. And if we think about the world that we live in, things like social media, their popularity and their high growth shines a light on the importance of social status, because a lot of what those tools do is they provide people with an opportunity to tell other people how well they're doing. So that they're tools that people can use to increase their social status. We have the phenomenon of the influencer that's connected to that. So you've got the A, we've got the P. The E stands for energy, and we are designed to conserve energy. That's why we turn as much as we can into a habit. And, going back to some of those lifestyle problems that we face, we're more sedentary than ever before. That's an energy conservation idea. So we're actually designed to walk about 12 miles per day. Yet, we get nowhere near that on average in recent years. So we conserve energy by moving less than we should. We drive instead of walk. We take the lift or the elevator instead of the stairs. We park as close as we possibly can to the supermarket when we get there. We stay at our desks at lunchtime instead of getting out and moving around. We also save energy by defaulting to high calorific food. We've got a huge increase in takeaways at the moment, and all these apps that are prospering from that. And some people are eating 2 takeaways a day. I was looking at some data the other day. This because our brain likes high calorific food because it gets that there's lots of energy in it. Energy for most of our existence has been a very scarce thing. There hasn't always been a Pret or a Tesco's or a food takeaway app on our smartphones. So we've evolved to conserve energy. I suppose another good contemporary example of energy conservation is that we procrastinate on mentally challenging work. So when we're doing work that takes a lot of mental energy, our brain encourages us to break away from it. So we check our smartphone and check in with our friends and our family to see what they're doing, because that gives a shorter term reward than struggling on with the work. The hangover of our evolution is what we call survival habits. So here are some examples of survival habits. Things like worrying, think about social status, survival. Beating ourselves up, think about social status. Procrastination, think about saving energy. Giving into temptation, that's the saving energy idea. And these habits, they operate like any other habit does. So if you want to get good at worrying, all you need to do is worry a lot, and you become a world champion superstar worrier, because you're going to get more neurons in your brain that are dedicated to worrying. If you want to get good at beating yourself up, it's exactly the same. If you want to get good at procrastination, it's exactly the same. And these are survival habits. So that's what we're designed to do. The challenge is that we live in a world described as the VUCA world. So VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And if we think about the world that we live in as we enter the 4th industrial revolution, the only constant in our world is change and disruption. This is because of technology. We've had huge advancements in technology since the late 1990s, things like artificial intelligence and machine learning. And this has put businesses under pressure to innovate, adapt, grow. And this means that they need their people to be more resilient, adaptable, focused, mentally sharp than ever before. Because work has become less about doing repetitive, habit-based tasks. It's become more about innovation. And what we're seeing is that, if you were a big business on the S&P 500, so if you're one of the top 500 performing companies in the USA in the 1920s, your average shelf life as one of the top 500 performing companies was nearly 70 years. So if you're big, you're going to be big for a long time. If we fast forward that today, the average shelf life for those types of companies currently is only about 15 years. And if you think of some of the biggest companies in the world at the moment, a lot of them didn't exist maybe 20, 25 years ago. So being big isn't a guarantee of long-term success anymore. Companies that are being successful are those that keep innovating and keep changing and keep adapting. So they need the people in the business to be resilient, to be adaptable, to be focused, to be mentally sharp. But the challenge is that the world that we live in, this fast-changing world where we feel like we're always on, it's not like the 4th industrial revolution isn't like the first industrial revolution or the second or the third. It's very hard to switch off now. You can't get away almost now. The email's always there, the smartphone's always there. And this creates distractions and pressures and stresses, and it impacts our sleep and our exercise and our diet. And it's leading to lots of people not feeling particularly well, and people feeling overwhelmed, and ultimately it's leading to people's brains not working properly, and it's leading to people developing lots of unhelpful habits. And connected to this idea is what we call the attention economy. So we're now, and this is become kind of common language, but we're now talking about our attention is a commodity that big business is trying to get. And I've heard someone describe this as eyeballs now are now the most expensive real estate on the planet, because everybody is trying to get their message into your eyeballs. So the attention economy is, it's causing lots of challenges in making it more difficult for people to be mentally well, physically well, and stopping people from fulfilling their potential.
Yeah, interestingly, John, the word attention economy is now common parlance, I think we can say, and it was the subject of a report by BBC Newsnight's David Grossman in November 2017. He produced a piece, the title of which was "How Technology Tries to Hack Your Brain." The report highlighted how social media giants need us to use their platforms constantly so they can increase their advertising revenues, back to the eyeball being the most valuable real estate idea again. The film contained a clip of Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg. Many of us know him. He said his company's mission is to bring the world closer together. But shortly after that in the piece, Facebook President Sean Parker was shown giving an interview. And in that, he described the mission in very different terms. He said it's how we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. Parker also revealed that Facebook will try to give anyone who uses it a regular hit of the pleasure hormone dopamine. This encourages us all to use the platform more. Sean Parker actually described it as a social validation feedback loop that hacks the human brain and exploits psychological vulnerabilities that we all have.
Yeah, and I think, the nail is on the head there. It sounds really uncomfortable, but it's real. Big business has worked out what our brains like to do, and they've hacked into what we've called the survival habits. And this has led to us doing more of these survival type habits than are actually helpful for us. And if we think about the kind of things that we need to be doing to be healthy, happy, and at our best, which is get our brains working properly, short-term gratification, which we call hedonism, and also eudaimonia, personal progress, this attention economy has made it much more difficult to look after our brains, much more difficult to sleep well, to eat well, to exercise properly. It's also made it much more difficult to delay short-term gratification. And we just find ourselves on what we might call an hedonic treadmill, just chasing that next short-term gratification piece. And some organizations, they're pursuing this. So they put pool tables into their workspace. They've got perk schemes, etc. And it's done with really good intent, but just having hedonic pleasures does not make people healthy, happy, and feel fulfilled in their lives. They need to get a balance between all these three areas, including good brain function and personal progress. So what the VUCA world and the attention economy are doing is they are making a lot of people not feel particularly well. So that's the reality. And we have to be very clear here that unhelpful habits are the root cause of all these problems. So unhelpful habits are the root cause of well-being and performance challenges in life and work. And I'm not hearing that said, but it's what is going on. And until we start to address our fundamental unhelpful habits, we're not going to make a big change to the mental health challenges we're seeing, the presenteeism problems that we're seeing. I think in combination are costing certainly the UK economy, according to recent reports, over a billion pounds a year. So let's be clear, unhelpful habits are the root cause of mental health challenges if you've got those in your organisation. They're the root cause of high levels of stress, the root cause of presenteeism, the root cause of disengaged people and teams. They're the root cause of not having good innovation and creativity in the organization. They're the root cause of the kind of modern leadership challenges that we face, the root cause of people feeling burned out and unwell, the root cause of poor morale. This is real. Now, the challenge that we face in a session like this is that we only have a short-term memory of about 30 seconds. So every 30 seconds, your brain is dumping information. And if we want to consolidate learning, what we need to do is to repeat. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to repeat in your own mind some of the things we've talked about so far. So I'm going to throw a test question at you to see how well you do. Here's the question. What does VUCA stand for? Now you can think in your mind what it stands for, say it out loud to yourself, or you can write it down if you want. But the point is that if you want to optimize your learning from a masterclass like this, it's a really good idea to be making notes and to be really actively engaging in the learning process. And that's going to optimize what you actually get out of this process. So I would encourage you to do that. So here's a summary. We live in a world described as the VUCA world, where the only constant is change. Yet we have a brain which is designed for survival, a brain that's been evolving for over somewhere between 200 and 300,000 years. And the brain's number one operating rule is the easier it is to do something, the more likely it is we will do it. So our brain is running on habits. Now, when you put this kind of brain into the kind of world that we live in, what we get is more people than ever before, whether they're adults, teenagers, or children, reporting that they do not feel very well. And when you look at the science that sits behind this, it makes complete sense, because the habits that are driving most of our behavior are not particularly helpful in helping us to be healthier, happier, and fulfilling our potential.
Okay, John, so let's summarize what we've discussed so far in this Tougher Minds Masterclass about well-being and performance habits. 98% of what we do in our lives and work is a habit. As humans, we're designed and mentally hardwired to survive. The VUCA world demands constant change and provides many challenges for us. The nature of the attention economy means our brains are constantly being hijacked. This makes it difficult to be healthy, happy, and to fulfill our potential. John, that's quite a bleak picture. There's a lot of bad news there. What can we do then to thrive and succeed?
Yeah, okay, so we've had a lot of bad news so far. So if we want to stop ourselves from failing, stop our teams from failing, family units from failing, businesses from failing, what we need to do is work towards creating what we're going to call purposeful development mindsets. We mentioned this at the start with the Warren Buffett example. The first thing that we can do to create a purposeful development mindset is what we call me power conditioning. Me power conditioning is all about purposefully choosing to work towards being at your best. So you can put this on a continuum. One end of the continuum is I refuse to work towards being at my best. I refuse to help myself to be healthier. I refuse to do anything to help me to be happier. I refuse to do anything to fulfill my potential. My expectation is that I should be healthy, I should be happy, and I should be performing. And if I'm not, it's not my fault. That's the end of the continuum. The other end of the continuum is I choose to work towards being at my best. So this is me deliberately working towards being healthier, happier, a higher performing version of myself. And if we want to be healthy, happy, and at our best, it turns out it's actually quite difficult to do in the VUCA world with the attention economy. So we've got to deliberately work towards it. How do we do that? It starts with stepping back and recognizing that most of what we're doing most of the time is mindless and unconscious behavior. That is, it's a habit. So we have to step back and reflect and think about our habits, both our unhelpful habits, those survival habits, like worrying too much, giving up too easily, getting overstressed, beating ourselves up too much, procrastinating too much, whatever they are, both our unhelpful habits and also our helpful habits. And what we need to do is just target one small unhelpful habit at a time and work towards replacing that with something that's more helpful. As we go through this masterclass, I'm going to show you the framework of how you can do that. And you can use that framework so that you can keep building more and more helpful habits. And by doing this, we are creating a purposeful development mindset, the kind of mindset that makes it easier to be healthy, happy, and at our best in the challenging world that we live in. So this mindset's going to make it easier to do the kind of things that make our brain work properly. And it's going to make it easier to get a better balance between hedonism and eudaimonia. That is, having some short-term gratification, that's great, but sometimes delaying it so that you can achieve those bigger goals that you want to achieve. Now, what we're seeing is that when we get teams or organizations that pack their people or pack themselves full of people with purposeful development mindsets, we call them purposeful development teams or organizations. Now, the other option here is that we just have a typical group of people where, by default, some of them will be purposefully developmental, but it will be a very small percentage. Most people will just have the 8 mindset, which is doing what we've always done, just surviving and getting on with people. That was fine. In fact, that worked quite well in the first industrial revolution, where you could learn a trade as even a child or a teenager, and you could just keep doing that trade for the rest of your life. So you were just repeating habits once you'd learn what you needed to do for the rest of your life, and you just had to turn up for work, do the same job every day and fit in. The 8 mindset was great for that. The 8 mindset was also okay in the second industrial revolution, and it wasn't too bad for the third industrial revolution, but it doesn't cut it in the fourth industrial revolution. What we're seeing is that the teams of the organizations that become in and that are purposefully developmental, they are just doing much better in the modern world. So they are the kind of benefits they're experiencing are connected to, they're seeing improved performance, but also greater well-being, enhanced resilience, increased productivity, increased innovation, less stress, improved morale, improved employee retention and engagement, better leadership development, improved performance under pressure, more successful change management. Most change management in most places fails. In these organizations, they're more successful with creating successful change. They're just getting happier people both in life and in work. And those two things are becoming more and more blurred all the time. And all they're doing is they're creating an environment that makes it easier for their people to make tiny little daily adjustments. We can make changes, but we have to make tiny changes, tiny little adjustments. And that's the first step to building a new habit. And what we find is that there are certain habits that if people build, when we call these vital or progress habits, they just start to make life easier. And these are habits connected to better sleep, better diet, better exercise so that our brain can work properly. Habits connected to better stress management. Habits connected to spending less time thinking about unhelpful thoughts. Habits connected to performing well under pressure. Habits connected to being more productive, doing more in less time so that you can be more creative and innovative. Habits connected to building and maintaining what we call robust confidence levels. And once you can do all those habits and create what we call me power, then you can learn how to build better habits for transformational leadership. So we find that if we get people making small adjustments in connection to these types of habits, life gets easier. Wellbeing and performance become easier. And I think one challenge we're facing in the VUCA world, where change is a constant idea and change management is a term we're all familiar with, is that often we're focusing our change management too much on the big goals, the outcomes, the physical restructuring, and we're forgetting that change management is a person-centric process. And so we've to help people to understand this in more detail and to get more success with change management, we've created what we call the personal change management model. This is a simple 3-step model. And if we go back to that Warren Buffett example, I'll talk you through how this looks. So the first step Warren Buffett did was that he looked at himself and he looked at his habits and he recognized some of the things he was really good at. The numbers, no doubt, he thought that was a good strength for him. But then he recognized, well, actually, I need to get better at performing under pressure. And we might call that became his priority progress habit. And that's the first step. We've got to recognize what are the habits that are going to be absolutely essential if we want to be at our best. And then once Warren Buffett recognized that, this is step number 2, he recognized that he had to get some new knowledge and some new skills to help him to get better at performing under pressure. So he went to that Dale Carnegie session. Step number 3 then, because knowledge and skills aren't enough, is we've got to keep practicing. We've got to keep practicing that new habit to make it automatic. And to do that, we need to create what we call a personal habit program. And I'll show you how to do this later. But a personal plan that actually makes it easier for us to keep practicing the kind of thing that we want to get better at, the kind of thing that we want to automate. So if we want to help people to build habits, those 3 steps, the personal change management process, are really powerful. And we need to empower our people to understand this. But as well as that, we need to set up the environment so it makes it as easy as possible for people to do that. And a core part of the environment is what we call transformational leaders. And transformational leaders are like habit mechanics. They help create an environment that makes it easier for people in the organization to keep making these small adjustments. So when you couple together personal change management and transformational leaders, you get both me power and the foundations of team power. So if you want to create powerful teams, the first step is getting everyone doing me power conditioning. And then in our team power model, there are 4 steps after that. But the first step is that we need to get everybody doing me power conditioning. So this goes a long way to doing that. So how do we start? We start by, if we're going to build new habits, we've got to start by doing what we call self-watching. So self-watching is what it says it is. It's watching ourselves more. It sounds a little bit creepy, I know, but it does what it says on the tin. Remember, most of the time we are doing mindless behavior. So at least 98% of the time we are just running on autopilot. So we've got to watch ourselves. And we could say, well, I noticed that I'm beating myself up a lot. That's an example of self-watching. But we need to watch ourselves much more intelligently than that. So an example of intelligent self-watching would be, well, I'm beating myself up a lot. Okay, now here are the steps that I'm going to take to build new habits in this area. So we need to watch ourselves intelligently. To make it easier for people to do this, we've created what we call the APE test. And you can go online to our Tougher Minds website and you can take the APE test. But just so you've got a sense of it now, I'm going to read through the APE test so you can start to reflect on some of these questions. So the APE test is an intelligent self-watching tool. It makes you reflect on your habits. And there are 11 statements in it. And let me read the first statement. I reflect on my diet, exercise, and sleep and plan to make daily improvements in these areas. Now, if you never do that, you give yourself a 1 out of 10. And if you always do that, you give yourself a 10 out of 10, or you might be somewhere in the middle. So there are these 11 statements. You need to read them or listen to them as I read them out. Just give yourself a score. If you can, make a note of the score. And by the time we get through all 11, you're going to have a sense of where your strengths and your weaknesses are across these really important areas. So I'll read all 11 out, and I'll starting with 1 again. So after each one, you just got to give yourself a score. 1 is I never do it. 10 is I always do it. So statement number 1, I reflect on my diet, exercise, and sleep and plan to make daily improvements in these areas. 1, I never do it. 10, I always do it. Statement number 2, at the end of the day, I always reflect and highlight what went well and what I can improve tomorrow. So 1, I never do this. 10, I always do it. Statement number 3, at the end of every week, I reflect on what went well and plan how I can improve next week. 1, I never do this. 10, I always do it. Statement number 4, from time to time, I think about my future. I set long, medium, and short-term goals to focus my efforts and achieve my major objectives. 1, I never do this. 10, I always do it. Statement number 5, I perform well under pressure. 1, I never do this. 10, I always do it. Statement number 6, I recognize when I'm stressed and successfully plan to reduce my stress. 1, I never do that. 10, I always do it. Statement number 7, I monitor my confidence levels and successfully build up confidence in areas where it is low. 1, I never do that. 10, I always do it. Statement number 8, I recognize when my emotions are unhelpful and successfully keep them under control. 1, I never do that. 10, I always do that. Statement number 9, I successfully plan to improve my productivity levels. 1, I never do that. 10, I always do that. Statement number 10, I successfully plan to spend less time dwelling on unhelpful thoughts. 1, I never do that. 10, I always do that. And finally, statement number 11, I successfully plan to improve my performance as a leader. 1, I never do that. 10, I always do that. So take a little bit of time, reflect on your answers, and think about your strengths and weaknesses in each of those areas.
So, John, this APE test that you've just been through with us can help us understand more about our brains. It can help us understand more about our behavior and our habits. How can we use this then to begin to manage our unhelpful habits and develop new helpful ones?
So what we've been doing as we thought about the APE test and ourselves, we've been using what we call the prefrontal cortex. That was the little finger in the model of the brain that we made with our hand earlier. So we've talked a lot about the limbic regions. Let's dig a little bit deeper into limbic regions first. So we've labelled this as the ape brain. So you understand the APE acronym and why we call it that. And the ape brain is the $1 million brain. It's running most of what we're doing most of the time. Just to make this a bit easier to understand, we imagine that there's a character running the ape brain. We call the character Hugh. Hugh stands for horribly unhelpful emotions. Okay, so Hugh is running a lot of what we're doing most of the time, and we kind of blame Hugh for some of those unhelpful things that we're doing. And we can help out Hugh and the ape brain by using our prefrontal cortex. Now, we call this area of our brain the hack brain, and we imagine that the hack brain is run by a character called Wilhelmina Power or willpower, and you can decide which one you want to call it. And we can use Wilhelmina Power or willpower to help Hugh. And just to shine a bit of light on this, I want to tell you a little bit of a story about how we explain the brain to people in a simple way. So imagine that you've got a lighthouse in your head, and this lighthouse is spinning and it's searching all the time. And there are two characters that run the lighthouse. So you've got Hugh. Hugh is horribly unhelpful emotions. And you've got Wilhelmina Power, or we'll call it willpower. And imagine that Hugh works in the control center of the lighthouse, and it's using the light to scan the horizon, to scan not just your present thinking and whatever's going on in the world, but it's also using that light to scan your past thoughts, your memories, your thoughts about failures, regrets, and setbacks. And it's also using that light to think about the future, what might go wrong, where are the threats, where are the dangers. So Hugh's using the light to think about that stuff. And then when there are no threats and dangers on the horizon in the past, the present, or the future, what Hugh likes to do is get short-term rewards. And when Hugh sees a problem, a threat, or a reward that it wants to get, it calls up to willpower. So willpower lives upstairs in the lighthouse, in the library, and it spends its days there learning and thinking and reflecting. And when Hugh sees a problem, it calls up to willpower, and willpower comes down to help out Hugh. And when your brain's working properly, this is what we're going to call emotional regulation, top-down processing. And willpower comes down and it helps out Hugh. And it doesn't necessarily tell Hugh off. It's not negative. We're trying to form a really positive relationship between our willpower and Hugh. And think about willpower as the coach. It's helping Hugh to get better, to understand what's really a threat and what's not really a threat, etc. If we get that relationship right between willpower and Hugh, it's going to be easier to build better sleep, diet, and exercise habits, to build better stress management habits, to spend less time dwelling, to build more confidence, to be more productive, to perform better under pressure, and ultimately to become a better leader. But this is difficult. But this is what we're aiming to do. Just because it's difficult, it doesn't mean we can't achieve it. So hopefully the Lighthouse model helps you to get a better understanding of what's going on in your brain. And we're trying to get this really nice harmonious relationship between willpower and Hugh. So we talked about the hack brain. What we use hack for is it's an acronym, and the acronym stands for helpful attention control. Because if we can spend more of our time with our attention on things and doing things that are helpful for us, life gets easier. So we shorten this down and we talk about hacking the brain. So we can use our willpower to hack Hugh and the ape brain. And if you want to look at the science here, what we're calling hack, social scientists call self-control. People like Roy Baumeister, Walter Mischel, these preeminent psychologists. And neuroscientists would call this emotional regulation. People like James Gross, for example, they're all the same. So hack is the same as self-control or emotional regulation. And if we get good at this, the outcome is that we are more resilient. And people often talk to me about what habits do I need to become resilient? I wouldn't think of it like that. Being resilient is the process, the start of the process to building more helpful habits. Because all resilience is, it's recognizing, well, doing that thing or thinking like that isn't helpful for me. So I need to get my attention on or do something that's more helpful for me. That's what resilience is. And the quicker we can do that, the more helpful it becomes. And we can automate some of that via a process called implicit emotional regulation. But the outcome of being resilient is all this stuff that we increasingly value in 21st century life. So it makes it easier for us to be healthier, happier, less stressed, more productive, more motivated, more confident, more creative, at our best more often. I might think, well, how do we know that? Because we've been studying this now since the 60s, and scientists are starting to call the ability to hack your brain the greatest human strength. And the reason that scientists call this the greatest human strength is because it's predictive of certain life outcomes. So if you're good at this, you're more likely to achieve certain outcomes in life, including more likely to be more successful in school when you're young, more successful in life when you're older. Better chance of having lower stress levels, better mental health, better physical health too, to be happier, to be more trusted, to be more popular with other people, to have stronger marriages, romantic relationships, fewer drinking and drug problems, less likely to commit crimes. It's pretty good, isn't it? Fewer traffic accidents, fewer eating disorders, lower partner abuse. These are all outcomes connected to this construct. And in the far end of life, you are more likely to live longer. And that's why we're very passionate about teaching people about this and how to get better at it, because we can get better at it, as I will explain shortly. So what is it again? Just to recap, because that all sounds like really amazing. So what is it that I need to be doing differently? Well, it's all about getting good at recognizing, so being more self-aware, doing more self-watching, recognizing, well, doing this thing or thinking like this isn't helpful for me. So I need to reframe and get my attention back onto something that's more helpful for me. And we use willpower to help us to do that. And the thing that we need to understand about our brain is that it's always on. We're always paying attention. And if you could just do a quick exercise now. So I'm going to put my hands onto my ears loosely and just imagine that I'm wearing an invisible pair of headphones. And you could do this as well if you wanted. And you could imagine that there's a radio, your favorite radio station playing through the headphones, or your favorite song at the moment, or favorite podcast, or whatever it is. And you could think about, well, what are the size of the headphones and the color and the brand. But as you're doing that, I want you to notice how you are talking to yourself. And if you don't think you're talking to yourself, I want you to notice how you're saying to yourself, I'm not talking to myself. I'm not a crazy person. This is going on all the time. So our brain is an attention machine. We can't turn it off. And also it's a frog brain. It like jumps from one thing to another thing, and our attention span is getting shorter. And our brain has a preference for what it pays attention to. So it likes the short-term gratification stuff. And that, by paying attention to that kind of stuff too much, we get sidetracked, and it makes it more difficult for us to delay short-term gratification essentially and do the kind of stuff that help us to achieve the bigger goals in our life. And of course, we live in the attention economy, so our attention is getting pulled in lots of different directions all of the time. But the simple way to think about this is that you can either be thinking about and doing things that are either helpful for you or unhelpful to you. What does that mean? Well, it means that you can either be doing things that are helpful for you, making progress towards your health, your happiness, your performance goals, or you can be doing things and thinking things that are getting in the way, that are unhelpful for you making progress towards your health, your happiness, and your performance goals. And this is not the same as positive and negative thinking. I could have eaten this morning 3 donuts for my breakfast, and that would have felt really positive in the moment. That might have been really unhelpful for me. It would have been really unhelpful for me making progress towards my health and happiness goals, because it would have challenged my weight goals at the moment. Equally, if I was trying to get good at something at work last week and my boss gave me some negative feedback in the nicest possible way, that might have been a really helpful thing. So you've got to think about, there's only 24 hours in a day, and you can either be doing things that are helpful for you in that 24 hours or unhelpful for you. And you can think of the 24-hour period, it's fixed, there's no one's making any more time. It's like a barcode, but instead of a black and white barcode, it's like a blue and red barcode. Blue is the helpful stuff that I'm doing, red is the unhelpful stuff. You know, we often don't see the unhelpful things that we're doing. So what we need to do is, number one, recognize there are only 24 hours in a day. That means there's only 1,440 minutes each day, and there are only 2,880 30-second units each day. And when I think about helping people to be more efficient, more effective, to be healthy, happy, and at their best more often, I ask them to break it down into 30-second units, because it's all about reclaiming one set of 30 seconds at a time. They quickly add up. You know, you think about the job that should only take you 5 minutes, but it's taking 10 to 15 minutes because you're getting distracted. And by the end of the day, you're half an hour down, you're an hour down. And by the end of the week, you're half a day down. By the end of the month, your day's down. And that's time you never get back. So if we're going to get better at hacking our brain, the first thing we need to do is be more self-aware. So we do that by using the process of self-watching. And when we recognize that there's something we'd like to be doing differently, we use willpower to resist doing the current thing that we're doing. And the highly likelihood is that the current thing that you're doing that you don't like is an unhelpful habit. So, and it's easy because it's a habit, it's easy to do. So, and because it's easy to do, we need to resist doing it. And we use willpower to help us to resist. And we use willpower to help us then to switch our attention onto something that's more helpful for us. So instead of, for example, dwelling on the negative thought, we might use our willpower to help us to reframe the negative thought, or to start the action of writing something down that's going to help us to reframe the negative thought. Instead of just checking our social media, which might be the easiest thing to do, but it's going to mean that the piece of work we need to be getting on with is going to take us more time, then we use our willpower to resist just checking the phone. Instead of going for the chocolate cake, which you're in the habit of having every Thursday afternoon with your friends, when you work colleagues, when you go for that special Thursday afternoon cup of coffee, instead of going for the chocolate cake because it's a habit, use your willpower to resist doing that. And that's the start of building new habits. But what we have to recognize is that willpower is a limited resource. We've only got so much of it. And it only explains the starting process for building new habits. But the good news is that willpower is also like a muscle. It's in the sense that it's trainable. It literally is like the muscle for everything. It's a Swiss Army knife if we learn how to use it properly, because we can use it to start building new helpful habits. How do we know this? Well, up until maybe 20, 25 years ago, we used to think that when we stopped physically growing, our brain stopped changing in any meaningful way. So you've heard the expression, a leopard never changes its spots, etc. But then we got this technology called functional MRI scanners, and they showed us, because this is the first time we could actually see inside the brain in real time, they showed us that our brain is changing all of the time. And we get good at what we practice. So our brain changes in accordance with what we practice via the process called neuroplasticity. And the sites in our brain that are connected to better regulation, better hacking, if you like, they're like little muscles. And the more we work the muscles out, the stronger they get. And we can make them so strong that we can even turn emotional regulation into a kind of habit. We call it implicit emotional regulation. Equally, what we need to be mindful of is that the sites in our brain connected to the limbic regions, Hue and the ape brain, they're like muscles too. And the more we work those out, the stronger they get. We see that in things like post-traumatic stress disorders, etc. Sites in the brain like the amygdala, they're like muscles. If you work them out, they get stronger and better connected. So the good news is that it doesn't matter how good or bad we think we are at hacking our brain right now, we can get even better at it. It's a learnable skill like you can learn any other skill. So, in short, we can use our limited willpower to hack the ape brain and to help out how Hugh is interpreting the world. And we can do that to help us to start to build more helpful habits. This is the starting process. To go beyond that, we need to then tap into the best insights from behavioral science. And to help people to do that, we've created a simple, practical, actionable model called the 9 Action Factors model, which takes the best understandings we have from behavioral science and shows us how to use those insights in our personal life or across our businesses, across our teams, to make it as easy as possible for people to do what is most helpful for them. So we're not helpless. We can do better. And we're going to talk more about exactly how we can do that.
Okay then, John. Well, let's summarize again at this point. To give ourselves the best chance of being healthy, happy, and at our best, we need to do me power conditioning. This means stepping back, reflecting on our helpful and unhelpful habits, and targeting one small unhelpful habit to improve. We can use the APE test to begin this process. Then we can use willpower to hack our ape brain and begin building better habits. So, John, how does this process that we've outlined happen in reality? What do we actually have to do to put habit building into action?
Sure. So if we're thinking about the question, well, how can I build more helpful habits? There are 2 big ideas we need to get across first of all. The first big idea is what we're going to call controlling the controllables. We have more control over us building new habits than anybody else. Yeah, our default often is when we can't make a change or we don't feel very well is to think about the external factor that's causing the problem. So we have to be mindful that actually we can only control what we can control, so we should pay attention to that. And to demonstrate that example, I think I want to share a case study about a very famous athlete called Christina Fogel.
Yeah, and you've asked me to talk about this, John. The story of Christina Fogel, who's a former record-breaking German Olympic cyclist, is a compelling example of somebody controlling the controllables. In her career, Christina Fogel won 2 gold medals and a bronze at the Olympic Games and 11 world titles. She was a genuine global sports star and champion. But tragically, in June 2018, she suffered a severe training accident at her home velodrome in Cottbus in Germany. Because of Christina's profile in the sporting world, in the cycling world, the incident made big headlines. Unfortunately, it left her paralysed and unable to walk again. In the aftermath of the accident, she explained her feelings in an article on the BBC Sport website. She said, "I realised quickly I wouldn't walk again. Tears will not help. It is what it is. I'm ready to take on this challenge and make the best of it." Then in a news conference at the Berlin hospital where she was being treated, Fogel described again to the BBC the moments immediately after the crash. I said, breathe, breathe, breathe. And then I checked. Then I saw where I lay, how I was. When my shoes were off, I knew that this was it with the walking. Asking, why me, doesn't bring you any further. I want to get back into life, not depend on a lot of help. I must use the strength I had from competitions for my life. In 2019, Christina Fogel also gave a follow-up interview to our own British cycling champion, Sir Chris Hoy. This gave us even more insight into how she dealt with her situation. She told Chris Hoy, "This is the toughest challenge ever, but what do you do? Lie in bed and do nothing each day? Or take it on and achieve what you can?" She also said, "I'm still happy to be here, and my situation could have been worse than it is. It could have been that I have no movement in my arms." Sir Chris Hoy also outlined how Christina talked about having new goals and new things to look forward to in life. She talked about how lucky she felt to have support from all around the world and to receive an adapted car, a new wheelchair, and to have a new house built that's going to be a bungalow with wider door frames and better access. Christina Fogel successfully reappraised the meaning of her catastrophic accident. She began to think about how things could have been worse, and she began to look for benefits. She asked herself how she could adapt her personal goals. She looked for new sporting opportunities that were now presenting themselves. The way she reframed the terrible, life-changing events and circumstances in such a positive way is what we might call a world champion example of somebody controlling the controllables and regulating their emotions.
And it is just that. It's a fantastic example of someone recognizing that the first thing they can control is how they think, how they mentally process the events that are unfolding or have unfolded. You can't necessarily stop a client or a colleague or a family member or a friend upsetting you today or coming across something that upsets you. What you can do is control how you respond to that. Regulate your emotions. We can control how we think. So if we're going to get good at building better habits, we need to take the responsibility for that. We can do that. We have the best chance of controlling ourselves. And it's not about other people, it's about ourselves. So if you want to get good at building new habits, the first thing you need to do is get good at controlling the controllables. That is regulating your emotions, noticing your emotions and managing them. Like Christina, reframing, looking for the benefits, really managing in a proactive way how we think. The second big idea is what we're going to plan for attention control. So remember, we're always paying attention, and the big dominant limbic regions of our brain, the ape brain, which is being run by that character called Hugh, they are controlling our attention most of the time in a very mindless way. So that lighthouse is just scanning around. Our best weapon against managing and helping the ape brain and Hugh is to plan what we're going to pay attention to. So that means that on Thursday afternoon, when I go for my nice afternoon coffee break with my colleagues, and I always have the chocolate cake, today I'm going to plan not to have it. And I'm not going to plan not to have anything. I'm going to just plan to have a healthier option. Might even be a cakey type option. It just might be a healthier cake. And so if we want to have a great night's sleep tonight, it's going to be easy to do that if we plan how we're going to do it. So I'm going to talk more about how we can plan to take more control. Planning starts with self-watching, and we did the ape test, obviously, to do that. So I'd like you to think back to the ape test or think back to the numbers that you wrote down. And just in your own mind, think about the one area that you notice that if you think, well, if I can improve that area, that's going to give me the biggest payback. There might be several areas that you want to improve, but the reality is that we can only change one small thing at a time. We can only make one small adjustment at a time. So you can create your me power wish list if you like, list down all the things that you might want to change in the future, but you're just going to pick one for the time being. And it's likely that the area that you want to work on is connected to improving sleep, diet, or exercise, managing stress better, spending less time thinking about unhelpful thoughts, performing well under pressure, being more productive so you can be more creative and innovative, getting better at building and maintaining robust confidence levels, or getting better at building better habits to become an even better leader. Because all the test questions are pointed to these areas. And obviously I can't cover everything in this masterclass. We are going forwards, going to cover all of those areas across different masterclasses. But in this first instance, I want to just pick one example. And the example area that I'm going to select is thinking about how can we build better habits around better stress management and spending less time on unhelpful thoughts. And what we're doing here is now we're moving from self-watching to setting an aim. So I've recognized here's where I am. My aim is I want to make a small improvement in this area. And the area I've selected is make a small improvement in the way that I manage stress, the way that I think. So I'm spending less time dwelling on unhelpful thoughts. But having an aim is just a wish if you don't put a plan behind it. So as well as an aim, you need a plan. So we self-watch, we make an aim, and then we make a plan. And we call this the swap cycle. So no one is making any more hours in the day. They're fixed. So if we could go back to our barcode timeline, our red and blue timeline, all we can do is recognize where the red lines are, and we can start to squeeze out the red lines, one small red line at a time, by swapping something that we're doing. So that's the swap cycle, and that's the core change mechanic we teach people. So I suppose the most complex part of the swap cycle is the plan. And to help us to create an effective plan, we're going to tap into our 9 action factors model. So our 9 action factors model is like a scientific guide to making small adjustments using the best behavioral science that we understand. What we need to recognize is that everything we're doing right now is being affected by these factors, these 9 factors, yet they're broadly invisible to us. Big businesses know quite a lot about these factors, and they are activating them all of the time to get them to do what they want you to do so that their stock prices go up. So if we're going to get really good at managing our own behavior, we need to learn how to activate as many of the 9 action factors as possible. So not just some of them, as many as we can. And the model we created has over 200 rules in it. So you put a problem into the model like, I want to get better at managing stress, and you can apply that problem to these 200 plus rules that we've created. We can't go through all of the 200 rules in this session, but I can talk you through a simple habit planning process that we've created. So this is a change aid. It's called the habit building plan. And in all of our work, we are passionate about helping people to move from the knowing to the doing to the habit. More people than ever before know that they need to eat at least 5 portions of fruit and veg per day. But yet in the NHS, we've got a huge problem of people not doing that still, because knowing isn't enough. And we can't build new habits just by knowing new things. We're only going to build new habits by creating plans and practicing the kind of things that we want to do. So the habit building plan has been designed to make it easier to practice the habits that we want to build. So I'm going to talk you through that and talk you through an example of how I would approach building a better habits. You've got to think about each of these questions and statements I'm going to read out, and think about your answers to them, because they'll be a little bit different to mine. So the first thing that we need to do in the habit building plan is describe the small, specific, new helpful habit that you want to build. So I could say, for example, well, I want to spend less time dwelling, but that is too vague to be helpful. It's a bit like saying, I want to get more sleep. It's too vague to be helpful. It's a bit like saying, I want to do more exercise. It's too vague to be helpful. We might want to work towards that as a bigger outcome goal, but we've got to focus on the process of what's going to get us there. So you've got to describe the small, specific, new helpful habit that you want to build. So a much better thing for me to write down is, I'm going to complete a daily 3-to-1 written reflection at the end of each day at my desk. See how specific that is? So I will know whether or not I do that at the end of each day. What's a 3-to-1 reflection? So this is drawing on an idea called the Big Finish that was created by, or was coined by one of my colleagues called Professor Jim McKenna. And the 7-day Big Finish is a tool that we use to help people to build the habit of writing down at least three helpful reflections every day, and then one thing they can do even better in the next 24 hours. Our best way of practicing thinking is by writing it down, because then we're having to actually pay attention to what we're thinking, and it's harder for our mind to drift. So at the end of each day, I'm going to write down 3 helpful or positive things, at least 3 helpful or positive things, and then one thing that I can do even better in the next 24 hours. So for example, if I was doing this at the end of yesterday, I may have written down, I went for a run first thing in the morning, which wasn't necessarily that positive because it was freezing cold and it was 6 in the morning. I didn't really feel like doing it, but I knew it was a really helpful way to start my day. And thankfully, I've built a habit of doing that. So I know it's a habit because it's as much as I feel like I don't really want to do it, it's easier to do it now. And it's easier to do it because I know the benefits it will accumulate. Yeah, and I'll probably still nag at me if I didn't do it for the rest of the day. So that's a habit now. You know something's a habit when it's easier to do it than not do it. So I might write down, I went for a run this morning. And yesterday I was doing some training in the city of London. So I might write down, I got to work with some lovely people because they were. And it was really good to work with those guys, as it always is. And then I might also write down, well, we had a little bit of a setback at work yesterday. But we learned from that setback. We didn't dwell on the negatives. We reframed it and we learned from it. So I might write that down as well. So I'm making myself pay attention to at least 3 helpful things that have happened to me today. And I'm also going to write down one thing that I can do even better in the next 24 hours. So yesterday I may have written down, I need to be asleep 10 minutes earlier tonight than I was last night. And I did that. So that was good. So it's a 3-to-1 reflection. This is drawing on Barbara Fredrickson's work, Flourishing and Languishing. So that's what I want to achieve. That's the first statement. The next question we're going to think about is describe what you currently do, your unhelpful habit, instead of the new helpful habit that you want to build. So I would say, well, normally at the end of the day, what I tend to do is I tend to dwell on the negatives and what went wrong, because that's my ape brain and that's what I'm in the habit of doing. So whatever new habit we want to build, we've got to think about, what do I currently do instead of that? So that's what I've got down. Number 3, describe what reminds or triggers your current unhelpful habit. So I've got, social media, because I tend to go on the social media at the end of the day and it reminds me how well everyone else says they're doing. So I start to beat myself up and question why I don't think I'm doing as well as them possibly. And then maybe I've got some negative colleagues who always dwell on the negatives, or negative partner or family members. So I need to be aware of what's triggering me to dwell on these unhelpful things. That's really helpful to understand. Number 4, describe how you will remind yourself. So how will you trigger yourself to practice the new helpful habit that you want to build? Because to make it a habit, you've got to practice doing it. So I'm going to say, I'm going to use my daily 7-day Big Finish plan. I'm going to put that into my planner. And in fact, we have something similar that you can download as a free resource from our Tougher Minds coaching page, which has all our free resources on it. It's called the Daily 8 Brain Management Plan. It's similar to that. It's got a 3-to-1 daily reflection at the end of it. So I could use that. I could put that in my physical diary. So it's a physical reminder. Maybe I could create a screensaver. So maybe I take a picture of that 3-to-1 reflection plan and use it as the background image on my phone. And then maybe I might actually create an electronic digital trigger. So I actually put this into my digital calendar. so that at the end of the day, I get a reminder that I need to do the 3-to-1 reflection, so I can almost book that as an appointment with myself. So you've got to think about how you're going to remind yourself to do what you want to do, because whatever the current habit is, there's already strong reminders in your environment. So you need to change those. Question number 5, if it is helpful, this might not be relevant to everybody, but if it is helpful, describe the new knowledge and skills you will need to help you secure your new habit. So if this is, let's imagine that I've got an exercise habit and that I want to build, so I want to do more exercise every day, which means I want to reinstate going for that run every day, or just going for that 10-minute walk at lunchtime. It could be as small as that. I might have already previously had that as a really good habit, but it's gone away for whatever reason. If that's the case, I probably don't need any new knowledge and skills, because it's something that I already know how to do. However, if it's something you don't really know how to do, you're going to need some new knowledge and some new skills. You might have all the motivation in the world to want to learn how to drive a car, but without knowledge and skills, you won't be able to do it. So my answer to this question is in connecting to getting better at managing stress and writing down my 3-to-1 reflections every day, is that I need some new knowledge and skills in this area. So I'm going to do some personal research to help me to understand how I can get better at reframing unhelpful thoughts. And one of the things that we teach people is called a WABA, which is a written 8-brain reflection. So we teach people how they can write down to reframe unhelpful thoughts. So if I'm going to get better at this, I'm going to need some skills to allow me to build that habit. Question number 6 is, if it is helpful, describe where and how you will acquire the new knowledge and skills. So I might say, well, I'll take a Tougher Minds Masterclass on how to build better stress management habits. So if you want to learn new knowledge and skills, you need to state and work out where you're going to get them from. Number 7, describe in detail why you want to build this new habit. So this is connected to personal motivation. Any small change that you want to make today is going to be easier to keep persisting making that change if you understand why. So if you can connect it to your big long-term goals. So part of the reason that I do the work that I do is because I'm really passionate about helping others to be at their best. So I know that if I get better at reframing unhelpful thoughts, starting with doing the 3-to-1 reflections, I'll save time because I'll spend less time dwelling, and it'll give me a better chance of being at my best more often. And that will mean that I'm better able to help others to be at their best more often. Number 8, who can you ask to help you to build a new habit? This is about social influence, really. It's ideal if this person is also, or even group of people are working on the same thing that you're working on. And if you can practice that habit at the same time. So I might say, I'm going to work with Jenny, who works in our office, because she wants to work on this as well. And when we have our afternoon coffee break together, we're going to verbally discuss the 3-to-1 reflections, and we're going to try our best to try to find more than 3 helpful things. We're going to do that verbally, which is going to make it easy for us to write it down at the end of the day. Question number 9 is about rewards, because our brain understands rewards and penalties. So it's about what will be the reward for building a new habit. Now, we're getting into the realms of gamification here. And we have lots of different rules around how we can gamify things in different ways. But, very simply, you can think of rewards on 3 levels. One is internal rewards, one is external rewards, one is social rewards. So one kind of reward is that if I do this, it makes me feel better. That's internal. An external reward is if I do this, I get something tangible from it. And social reward is if I do this, my social status increases. So I can say, well, if I get better at reframing, managing stress better, I'll feel better, I'll waste less time, I'll spend more time doing clever work, and I'll get to spend more time with my family. So there'll be the rewards. And then finally, what will be the cost or the penalty for not building the new habit? And I'll just say, well, it's the opposite of the above. I won't be able to achieve those things that I've listed as rewards. So that's an example of how to build a habit plan. And I appreciate everyone's habits plan is going to be different. And we spend a lot of time working with people to create very detailed habit plans, but that's an example of how you do it. So that's the planning part of the swap cycle. So we self-watch, we make an aim, and we make that detailed plan. And this is going to give us the best chance of starting to build a new habit and persist with changing our automatic behavior.
So, John, that planning, as you say, very detailed. How many new helpful habits can people build? Can they start to build several at the same time, perhaps?
Well, it would be lovely if we could, but unfortunately, it doesn't seem viable. We've got to start with one tiny, small thing that we're going to change. So understand and recognize the kind of new habits that you might want to build, put them onto your Me Power wish list, but we can only build one small thing at a time. And connected to that is, some people say, well, how long is it going to take me to build a new habit, John? Well, it's very hard to put a time frame on these things because the only rule we can work with is we get good at what we practice. So you could say, well, it's going to take you 40 days to establish this as a new habit. But the reality is if you spend the next 40 days not practicing that habit and falling back into your old ways, then you're going to unravel all the work that you've done. So we get good at what we practice. And our life goes through ups and downs. Sometimes everything's great. Sometimes everything feels rubbish. And sometimes we're in between. That's why self-watching is so important, so we can catch ourselves. If things are going great, maybe there are still things that we can still improve, and that's a great time to challenge ourselves. If things are not going so well, if we're doing good self-watching, we can reframe and look at the small new habits that we can start to build to make life a bit easier again. So self-watching is absolutely essential to this process, and being realistic that we can only make one small change at a time. Use the rule, you get good at what you practice.
Okay then, John. Well, to bring this Tougher Minds Masterclass to a close, can you please give us a summary of everything we've discussed so far?
If we want to be healthy, we want to be happy, we want to be at our best more often, there are three simple things that we need to get right. Number one, we need to make sure that our brain is functioning properly. This means that you've got to sleep properly, eat properly, exercise properly. Number two, you need to have fun. You need to have some hedonism in your life, some short-term gratification. But you've got to balance that with eudaimonia. Balance it with delaying short-term gratification so that you can make the kind of personal progress that will make you feel fulfilled, make you feel like you are moving forwards in your life. That's what we're trying to do. To help us to do that, we've got to step back and we've got to look at our habits. We've got to recognize the helpful habits that are making our life easier, the stuff that we're good at, the good habits we've built up over a long period of time, both the thinking habits and the doing habits. But also we've got to recognize some of those unhelpful habits, some of those habits that are getting in the way, some of those habits that are stopping us achieving our goals, like Warren Buffett did when he talked about he wanted to get better at public speaking, better at performing under pressure. And the swap cycle is the core tool that we can do that, and connecting the habit building plan to the planning phase of the swap cycle. If we do that, we will be creating more of a purposeful development mindset. That is the mindset that we need for success in this challenging VUCA world with the attention economy. John, why is a purposeful development mindset different from a growth mindset? Well, growth mindset is just recognizing that you can do better. Purposeful development is, and that's the starting line. A growth mindset is part of our 9 change factors, but just knowing that you can do better and you can change doesn't explain changing behavior. It's the starting line. Being purposefully developmental, that means that you're proactive in building these small, new, helpful habits. And if you get good at that and you help your team members to get good at this and your family members and the organizations you're part of and the businesses, and you get everybody good at this, this is how you create success, health, happiness, and helping people and businesses to fulfill their potential in the 4th industrial revolution, in the challenging world that we're coming into. We need to help people to understand that the root cause of all the challenges we're facing is unhelpful habits. And we'll only be able to overcome that if we teach people how to build helpful habits. And not just the knowledge, but also the skills of how to actually change their behavior. If we do this, this is going to create me power conditioning. And this is the first step to building really powerful teams, something we will talk much more about in other masterclasses. The alternative is that we can keep our 8 mindsets and keep doing what we've always done. We can let other people dominate our behavior and ultimately help us to do more unhelpful habits than is useful in the world that we live in.
Well, John, thank you so much. That was the Tougher Minds Masterclass about well-being and performance habits, the root cause of success and happiness in life and work. For other Tougher Minds audio masterclasses and free tools and resources, go to coaching.tougherminds.co.uk. You mentioned it earlier, John. It's coaching.tougherminds.co.uk. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Habit Mechanic podcast. If you liked it, please subscribe and tell someone else about one of the ideas or insights that you found most interesting.